2.
Rest. For the month of July, we have been taking the idea of, hey, rest and slow down and unbusy yourself and connecting it to the idea of, building and reforming and even rediscovering your spiritual disciplines, things like prayer and, Bible study and community and stewardship. And on Sunday, we talked about this idea of serving and serving as a spiritual discipline. That as a Christian, we're called to serve others, to serve those in the church, those outside the church, and even start with those that are in our home, our children, our family, our spouses, those kinds of things. And so I want to take just a couple minutes in our last kind of devotional around this series on rest and talk about spiritual disciplines. And I want to ask you this question I've asked every week is there adequate time set aside in your life to experience God through these spiritual disciplines, through spiritual disciplines in general? Are we setting aside time? Are we unbusying ourselves? Are we saying no to some things, putting our phone away even, so that we can say yes to what God is up to in our life and allowing Him to work and move and for us to grow in intimacy with Him? Well, let's talk about serving. We read out of Isaiah 53 on Sunday where it talked about, you can go back and read it, it talked about Jesus as the servant who came to serve us to deal with the sins of mankind. And then we flip to Philippians 2, which Paul wrote on a picture of Christ. So you got Isaiah drawing a picture of Christ before He came and lived, and then you've got Paul drawing a picture of Christ, the servant, after Christ had died. And so in these things, we see this picture of Jesus as servant. Now, we know Jesus as Easter Jesus, miracle Jesus. I think I said Sunday, baby Jesus. But do we know Jesus as the servant, and are we trying to model our life like that in that way? Listen, Philippians 2 has this verse, this really powerful verse talking about serving. It says, do nothing from selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. And that is one of those verses that is incredibly heavy and weighty as it stands on its own. Almost impossible if you're not careful. So let me just give you a couple thoughts on serving that maybe can encourage you to continue as you serve those that God has placed around you, in your church, in your home, and where you live. The first thing is serving is a choice. I've got to actively make a choice to serve someone else. It's not something I just do. The second one is that serving helps me to emulate Christ, helps me to look like Jesus. And that's really the goal of being a Christian. And number 3, serving, helps you grow spiritually. We don't often contribute. We often think it's prayer and Bible study and going to church, but when I serve others, I'm being like Christ. And in being like Christ, I'm able to serve spiritually. Now, we said this, and so part of that growing spiritually and part of serving, it's not reluctant serving, but it's, this is what God's called me to do, and I'm doing it joyfully. And as we saw Jesus in Isaiah 53 doing it willingly. Serving encourages others in their walk with Jesus. As I serve someone else, if I choose to help them, serve them, wash their feet, and when I serve someone else, it encourages them and reminds them of God's love for them. We said this at the beginning of the sermon, and I would say it here again, that really the idea of serving is the idea of going last. That if I'm going to serve someone, it starts with me going last, humbling myself, doing nothing out of selfish ambition, considering others more important than myself, be last. And I think, I would conclude with this encouragement, that serving is a posture, not an activity. Serving is a posture of my life, not an activity. Just because I serve someone on Tuesday evening one time for 1 minute, that's not really the goal. The goal is to develop a spiritual discipline in my life where I'm constantly looking to serve others, serve those in my church, serve those around my church, and serve those in my home, my family, and even my spouse and my children. Where I'm looking to live a life of service to those God has placed around me. And so as we close out this series on rest, I would strongly encourage you and remind you, that we are called and wired, to serve other people. And to serve other people means I am last, to be last. And to be last means it's not about me.
1, 2.